Welcome to Coffee Conversations with Les and Paul, Revelation Edition.
A podcast sponsored by Piedmont Road Church of Christ and Ministry League.
We're here to discuss the book of Revelation, just as if we were asking Jesus himself. I am Paul Sperlin.
And I am Les Sandifer, and we hope you will enjoy our relaxed Bible-based discussions.
Thanks for joining us as we think about and talk about all those things we had asked Jesus over a cup of coffee. Welcome back to the Revelation Edition show, the Les and Paul show, 30 Minutes for God, but also Revelation Edition. So that's
Revelation
what this
Edition,
is.
yes.
That's what this is.
Still have our coffee?
We do. Have your coffee or whatever it is you're drinking with you. Open the Bible, invite the Lord, and specifically open it up.
That's good.
Yeah, I told you.
I'm trying Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
You didn't put creamer in it, did you?
Oh, no.
You
well,
didn't have to.
it had it actually, it's a blend. It's a remnant of something else that was in there.
Okay.
It's left in there.
Gotcha.
So the next time it'll be straight Cinnamon Toast Crunch just to see.
It's pretty strong.
Because it's all messed up with peppermint mocha, or
That's
a
right.
little bit messed up because
wow.
that was in the bottom.
Yeah, peppermint and toasty crunch.
Yeah.
Probably not a great combination.
It's an interesting combination.
It is. But whatever combination you're drinking, enjoy that.
Yep.
And let's have that cup of coffee and open the Bible, bring the Lord in, and let him be a part of everything in your life, but specifically the show.
We are working our way through the book of Revelation.
Yeah, we want to go ahead and thank Piedmont Road Church of Christ.
Yep.
Find everything for that at lifeinchrist.com. Located right here in Marietta, Georgia. And love to have you come visit with us sometime if you can. If you want to watch the show, you can watch the class through the YouTube channel right there on the website as well. On Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock, Les and I will be teaching the class at least through February.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll be closing down the book of Revelation, and then we'll
Move on to something else.
move on to something else. Also to Ministry League, thank you to everyone there, that the network and everything. Everyone asked, how can I hear the show? The best way is to download the Ministry League app and look for the button that says network. There's over 60 podcasts there for anything that you would ever want to listen to. But why would you listen to anything else but the Les and Paul show? And a couple of those are available there, so check those out. The 30 Minutes for God show, but also the Revelation edition, which is what we're about today. And we are in chapter 15. As we begin this, let's remind you, as we usually always try to do, is that we are looking through the eyes of John as he is looking through the doorway of heaven. And we're talking about symbols and signs. He literally talks about it, literally in the first phrase. And so we're excited about that. But also, don't forget who he's writing to. He's writing to the 7 churches of Asia. Jesus knows who they are and what they're about.
He walked among them.
He did. And so that being said, I think, and sometimes we don't emphasize this quite enough, there's a reason why John is seeing the things the way he's seeing them, because it's things that relate to those 7 churches of Asia.
Right.
We don't really talk about that much, but I think that the wordage, the verbiage, the imagery of what he sees, I think, is something that hits those 7 churches of Asia. I think it hits them in the heart, and they relate to it.
One thing we've tried to emphasize is that as we move past the 7 churches and we get into the stuff that causes a lot more questions and controversy, I suppose, it's really just an extension of the message given to the 7 churches. Now, the flavor of some of the other stuff is going to be different depending on who the reader is, which church they were from, as to how it impacts them or what that means to them. But it's all, we said in class there's some repetition that goes on, and it doesn't necessarily feel like it until you step back and look at the whole.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a repeating series of reminders to the church. And every time when we get a seal or a trumpet or a bowl, there's an aspect to it where it talks about the good, the faithful, and the bad, those that are following Satan.
Right.
What's the reward for those that follow Christ? What's the punishment for those that don't? I mean, and we see that play out in each sequence of events that goes on.
It's fun. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, jump in there.
Well, I was just going to say, it's funny because it's a story of good versus evil.
It really is. I mean,
I mean,
at its essence, that's what it is.
in what part of life is this not the story? I mean, everything. It's all about good versus evil. It's about making choices. It's about making the right choices.
Yeah.
If you make the wrong choices, then you're falling into a trap of the results of a bowl.
Yep.
Okay. or if you make the right
A
decisions.
bowl of what?
Exactly. The wrath and things like that.
That's right.
But also, you get to open the seals. You get to understand the things that Jesus wants you to know about, and so I think that's something that we get to take part to. So it's kind of neat because it's kind of a living movie, but it's real life, you know, and it's real life people, and they're making real decisions, and it's all about good versus evil. It started from the very beginning. We talked a few weeks ago in our show, about the fall of Lucifer, the fall of the devil, and the result there. I think that was last week, but
I think you're right.
It starts from making bad choices. Well, his bad choice, and God wanting to keep pure and holy heaven, and so you're out of here.
Folks ask why is it written in this language, in this type of language? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can certainly see a correlation between some of the Old Testament books and how they were written.
Yeah,
I mean, why God chose to present to Jesus, who then presented it, and so on and so forth. Why this particular subject matter was presented the way it was. I mean, we've talked about in class that it presents it in a way that the Roman Empire could not prevent its spread because they didn't understand it.
right.
The Bible doesn't overtly say that to us. We infer through really an understanding of the situation as to why it would have played out that way.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I mean, could God have revealed this information to his 7 churches in a different way? Yes.
Yeah.
So just like all these signs and symbols, we really have encouraged you not to get lost too much into every little sign and symbol,
Right.
and to lose the kind of overarching message of good versus evil, Jesus versus Satan. I mean, it goes all the way back to Genesis, right?
It does.
He'll
From the very
bruise
beginning.
your heel. You're going to crush his head.
That's right.
Right? I mean, what's the story?
right.
What's the story as a Christian? Satan influences everything in your life, or has the potential to.
Mm-hmm.
You decide whether you respond to that. But if you stay true to Jesus, the outcome is better.
It's so neat, though, once you break down the book of Revelation, it kind of opens up everything else that's ever happened in the Bible. I mean,
It's true.
It really helps,
Yep.
and it helps to get a better understanding. You mentioned earlier about, why do they write it this way? We don't know. Well, I think in a certain way we kind of do, in the fact that the Romans tried to glamorize everything.
It's a fair point.
And so they were all about mythology, and they were all about symbology.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why this is that, and we mentioned this before, is this is code so that God's people can sift through the symbols and the signs and the numbers and
Right.
realize the truth of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And not that this grand thing is happening here or happening there, that this is something that is communicated to God's people.
And it helps them understand that, again, that God is in control and God knows exactly what
Absolutely.
these Caesars are doing
Yep.
throughout time. I mean, this book was written in the life of a Caesar, but it represents kind of the concept of the Roman
Yeah.
Empire in general.
Right.
We'll get in 16 a reference to Babylon,
Mm-hmm.
a code, as Paul put it, a code word for
Yeah.
the Roman Empire. But at the end of the day, it's all about just reminding these folks that they're under some serious persecution,
Right.
but faithfulness leads to heaven.
Absolutely.
That's it.
So as you look at chapter 15, Revelation 15, there's 2 things I really want our listener to understand.
Okay.
2 things. And it breaks down, if you're doing like a sermon or you're doing like a devotional based on this chapter, there's only 2 points.
Okay.
Point number 1 is what John sees.
Yep.
There's things that John sees and he's going to look at. But number 2 is what John hears.
Okay.
Okay? He's going to be listening to some things. He's going to be listening to a song. He's going to be listening to the singers. We're going to have some worship aspect of this. We'll talk about it in a few
Not
minutes
the
too.
harps,
Not the harps.
because they're not playing them.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Oh, we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
For sure.
Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and amazing, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is finished. Introducing the subject matter, because verse 1, really, if you skip 2, 3, and 4, 1 continues in 5,
Right.
maybe even a little farther down. But it is interesting as he sets the stage. We're going to have a reference to plagues. What we're really talking about, the bowls of wrath.
Mm-hmm.
So in the terms of the 3 components of Revelation, seals, trumpets, and bowls,
Right.
we're fixing to get the bowls, but they pull in this same Old Testament reference and
Mm-hmm.
view of the world, because now we're looking at the plagues again, because we've already talked about plagues in a sense
Yeah.
in another chapter, but here we're going to pull in some direct correlations to not all 10. 5 of the 10 are referenced in chapter 16, which we'll get to in another podcast. But
Yeah.
we're setting the stage for it, but using the same kind of old imagery.
That's
Not
right.
old, but
He literally
historic
OLE.
imagery that they've seen.
OLE.
Oh yeah, OLE. That's it.
Old imagery, because he literally says that the first phrase of verse 1.
Yeah,
He talks about how great it is, but I love how he talks about it's coming to an end.
yeah,
Because he talks about how important it is to know that here's the last one, here's the last of the 7, and he talks about his wrath and that it is now complete.
yeah.
So it's showing some finality, I think.
That's right.
As we continue to go.
And the
through
story of the message here is that this isn't the last we'll see of God's wrath in history or in our lives or in whatever.
that. Right.
But in terms of the message to the 7 churches
Mm-hmm.
and how it impacts them and the Roman Empire, it is coming to its fruition,
That's right.
to its completeness.
Absolutely. So as we start this with the whole, I mentioned two points:
Yeah.
what he sees, what he hears. Under what he sees, we notice that it begins with their assignment.
Yeah.
He talks about their assignment. So in verse 1 and also jump down to verse 7, we won't read both those, but they are to pour out God's final judgment consisting of those 7 fill bowls, which is what we're talking about there in verse 1.
Yeah.
So 1 and 7 kind of complement themselves on that.
Yeah, and then we take a interlude's not a good word, but we take a different view in verses 2 through 4, where we see kind of some of that same imagery that comes from chapters 4 and 5 in specific, because we saw the sea of glass in chapter 4 when we were first introduced to the view of heaven
Right.
and God on the throne. But really what we have here is a picture of the faithful in worship. I think it's important as we think about what we're seeing is that we kind of touch base on this idea of worship and how important that is throughout the book of Revelation. It's a
Yeah.
recurring theme.
Right.
And the importance of our worship cannot be overemphasized,
Right.
because that's an important aspect of who we are in relation to God and what he expects of us.
But this is a big point to make too.
yeah,
John is seeing things.
right.
He is describing what he sees.
That's correct.
One thing he doesn't see is an assembly of worship in the first century.
Okay.
Not in heaven,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
I mean,
I see what
do
you
you
mean.
see what I'm saying?
You mean like
Into verse 2,
the 5 aspects. Yes.
I'm making sure that our listening audience understands the harp is mentioned in verse 2.
yes.
That doesn't mean that the Lord is inviting the harp into our worship.
Oh, yeah. No, great
It's
point.
again part of the symbols.
That's right. It's the concept here is that we are bowing to the Almighty,
Right.
and we are recognizing his power and might, which is what we do in our corporate worship today, but in some very specific ways. And it's a great point to be made to draw the distinction that this is not a literal transcript for how worship should occur.
Mm-hmm.
It's a representation that what we do in our lives is that we worship God appropriately.
Right.
Because, I mean, it says here, I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mingle with fire.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a juxtaposition.
It is.
in any of these things, because they're, as you said, they're visions and signs.
Right.
I also saw those who had conquered the beast in its image and the number of its name, standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And a very
singing the song of Moses.
very important point to be made about the harps
Mhm.
is that harps have a representation of this worship aspect in the sense that we are recognizing who we are and where we are. I
and recognizing who God is.
Yeah, recognize who God is.
Yeah.
Historically, that's the place they played.
And it's an offering of reverence.
It was a bad choice of words because
No.
they didn't play them literally. But, I mean, the harp has a representation in history of something.
Well, in Israel, in Rome, anywhere, when they come before the Caesar or the king,
Yeah.
they do play the harp.
Yeah,
They literally play the harp. David played the harp.
it's true.
You know, but I think a lot of times those are offered, to your point, they're offered to show reverence to hierarchy.
Yeah, and even with David, was there ever? And I'm just asking this question because I don't remember. But was there ever a reference to him literally playing the harp in a aspect of worship to God, or just playing it as a
I think it's on an individual,
right?
you're just showing reverence to God.
Because that's where everybody wants to and they want to
yeah.
go back and say David played the harp, and there
Oh,
were
yeah.
harps in heaven. And
If David played the harp, then why should we? Like, that's not David. God didn't command that.
folks, there's not literally a sea of glass with harps
Yeah.
in the hands of Christians in heaven.
Sea of glass tells me the water's not moving.
Yeah, this
It's very
is
still.
this is a representation
about worship.
of appropriate attitude.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, and we can read through this, but it's similar to the language we saw in chapters 4 and 5.
Right.
One point to be made here, I suppose, that we made in class last week, because the question came from somebody about literal something in chapter one of the chapters about is this to be taken literally. The reality is there's some aspects of literal that are intermingled in a way that you just have to be you have to be a diligent reader to understand. There are times where the literal is commingled, like
Okay.
they are singing a song.
Mm-hmm.
We will. I believe there's a literal aspect to how we will handle ourselves in terms of our worship to God that says we will be singing. That's part of the reverential aspect of what we will doing. Does that mean that some folks in heaven were literally singing? Maybe.
Why not?
Why not? But it doesn't mean that everything in the context of this verse should be taken literally, even if some aspects to it tie literally to things we do or will be doing.
Right. But to your point earlier, verse 3 and 4 basically seem like verses of a song.
Yeah.
I mean, they're singing.
And it says
praises
the
him.
song of the Lamb saying.
Right.
Some of these, and some of these phrases have been turned into
Oh, absolutely.
actual songs that we sing.
For your judgments have been made manifested. I mean, yeah.
You alone are holy. All nations will
You
come
shall
and
not
worship
fear.
you.
Do you know the song "Do Not Fear"? Have you heard the song "Do Not Fear"?
I
The
don't know.
passage. I think it's in Psalms or Proverbs. I'll find that.
And you asked me about another one. I actually led it because you asked me if I knew this song, and it came.
Yeah.
It was straight from Scripture.
Yeah.
And then when I asked the congregation that night, nobody knew it.
Oh, which one? Oh,
But it was so easy.
"Give Me the Heart of a Servant."
Yeah.
Yeah, which it is reference actually. In
So-
verse 2 or 3.
Yeah. So definitely some literal nature to some of this.
Yeah.
That you just have to
You just do.
kind of have to pull the pieces together and understand.
Yeah. So
It's tricky for some people.
we
though.
talked about their assignment, right? We talked about
Yep.
they poured out the God's final judgment consisting of the wrath of bowls. But there's also in verse 6 under the guise of he sees the angels, the 7 angels.
Yep.
There's their assignment, but there's also their appearance.
Okay.
And
Oh,
as I
that's a
look
great
in verse
point.
6, verse 6 kind of shows that out. And out of the temple came the 7 angels, having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure, bright linen.
With
And
golden
yes.
sashes around.
And yes, I slowed that down. And having their chest girded with golden bands. Because it shows a special adherence to beauty when it comes to proper worship, I guess.
This might be the only time in Revelation where the angels are described in their appearance. Maybe. It's not. It's rare. The angels are not normally. I mean, it's unique here, and there's probably a purpose to that.
Yeah.
In this particular context, as we come to a finish, because it's
Right.
I'm not aware of.
Not often, for
Get
sure.
off the top of my head,
Yeah.
because usually the angels are referenced,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily in their clothing. So it's an interesting point
Yeah.
to be made here because
good.
it clothed in pure bright linen
Right.
with golden sashes around their chest. What does that convey? Kind of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
The nature of
Proper preparation for worship.
and what they're
Mm-hmm.
what
Well,
they're bringing.
And back in verse 15, let's see. No. Jump back to verse 2. He sees a sea of fire and glass upon which stands those who have been victorious
Yeah.
over the beast. And so I guess it shows their appearance is not just being reverent in song, but also showing victory,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of neat.
Well, and of course, the pure bright linen, I mean, it just gives a visual of radiance
Yep.
that goes with the moment.
Absolutely. Verse 5, and also jump down to verse 8. He sees a smoke-filled temple.
Yep.
Under things he sees, the entrance of the Holy of Holies is opened.
Yep.
I mean, the temple itself is closed all until the bowl of judgment are completed, and it shows that completeness there.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting. We have some reference to the tent or the temple and the sanctuary, and
Right.
some kind of interplay there with two different aspects of the temple as we know it from Old Testament literature. But yeah, it's very cool.
It's neat.
And especially what you said about verse 8, and the sanctuary was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power,
Mm-hmm.
and no one could enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished.
And I think
So-
there's a piece of that that shows God is everywhere.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
yeah.
He's everywhere. So kind of neat.
And definitely in control.
No, absolutely. That makes him the Almighty.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting. This particular chapter is it's short.
Mm-hmm.
It has some interesting components to it.
It does.
What he sees and
And what he hears. And for that,
what he hears.
he hears the singers.
Yeah,
He hears the song. And other singers, he talks about, it gets back to that victory over the beast.
yeah,
And the song, the song of Moses, we talked about praises for justice,
yeah,
for holiness, for righteousness.
yeah.
And so you're right. It's absolutely about what he sees and what he hears.
It's
and
it's
cool.
I mean, it's a great point because it plays back into what we said about the repeating nature of Revelation. This is not the first time we've talked about what John has seen and heard.
Right.
I mean, over and over and over again.
No, that's true.
And there's a reason for that. There's a reason so that the reader, the intended audience of the first century, over and over again,
Yeah.
would get the message that of what John is seeing
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the various breakdown of these visions
Right.
within the one revelation,
Mm-hmm.
and what he hears from the message or
Absolutely.
from the singers or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting chapter.
Good stuff.
Next time around, we will start to get into those bowls of wrath
Yeah.
and see what happens there.
Can't wait. Hope you can't wait. I am Paul Sperlin. This is Les Sandifer. This has been Revelation Edition of Coffee Conversation. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to our sponsors, and we look forward to being with you over that next cup of coffee.